Welcome back to The Nation. I'm speaking with Justice Minister Judith Collins. Thanks again for joining us, Minister. You've got a lot of legislation going through Parliament right now. Let's look at first the Victims of Crime Reform Bill. Is this the start of a culture of compensation?
No, I think it is. It's a culture of recognising victims, and victims should have rights, because our justice system has always been about the state taking action against an offender and the offender having offended the state. But actually, we've forgotten until recently about victims, and that's one of the hallmarks of this government and our justice policy, is that we think that victims should have a role to play, that victims should have rights, and that we should take notice of that.
There has been some criticism, though, that by allowing victims of crime to seek compensation, that creates inequities, really. And I want to quote here Justice Tipping, because he says there would be no logic, and indeed substantial illogic, in prohibiting civil proceedings that seek compensation for personal injury, yet allowing the same result to occur through criminal proceedings. Is he right?
Well, I think this is a different situation, because obviously the victims of, say, assaults, for instance, who suffer injuries, accident compensation assists them in terms of the costs and everything else associated with that. But when you've had people who may have suffered extremely in terms of either monetary sense, or they've suffered all sorts of other injuries to them, I don't see any particular reason why if a criminal, an offender, gets a big payout from the state for some harm that's been done to them, that they shouldn't have to give that or help their victims.
Okay.
Sounds fair.
If I'm injured in a car accident, I'm hit by a drunk driver, and I can sue that person. What can I sue for? No,
you won't be suing that person. You'll be, in fact, assisted by ACC, so there won't be that sort of personal injury suit. But if that drunk driver then goes off,
though?
Yes, but if your offender then goes off and gets a payment from the state for something, or gets a windfall, you should be able to get something for whatever the cost has been. It might be the car, it might be something else. But I think really we do need to start thinking about victims. I've certainly heard the odd judge say to me, oh, it's very distressing to have these victims in courts talking about their victim impact statements. But actually, isn't it time we started to look at victims?
Won't this put a greater responsibility on police to apportion blame now, though, in a crime situation? Well,
no. I think, in fact, this is the sort of issue which courts are very well able to do. And I think, I don't want to see us being mean to victims. They've already suffered. And when we start saying, oh, well, why should they get something? Well, actually, because they've done nothing wrong, and they have been injured, and they have been, in some cases, abused for years. And they've got a perpetrator who's saying, oh, well, I'm scot-free on it.
OK, you're also Minister for ACC. Do you foresee more scope for litigation beyond just victims of crime?
No, I don't. In fact, I think our ACC system's an excellent system. The only people who have asked me to extend it out or to bring back the right to sue have been some of my lawyer friends who've said, isn't it time we did that, because crime's down so much, Judith, we're missing out on work. So, no, I don't think that's my job.
OK, also the Objectionable Publications Bill's going through Parliament. Your critics say it's far too broad. Now, it was designed to sort of focus on child pornography and those issues. Yes. It's far broader than that, though, isn't it?
No, it's not at all. In fact, if you look at objectionable publications under the current legislation, it's pretty well defined, talking about children who are subject to torture, sexual abuse, adults who are subject to torture, those sorts of things.
It's also, they would include, books such as, books on growing marijuana under lights, or the anarchist cookbook. People are facing prison. But have you used a bit of a sledgehammer here to crack a nut?
No, we've actually used the definitions already in legislation, and in fact that's just ridiculous.
But that bans those books, that legislation. Well, so you'd be sort of potentially facing a prison term of 14 years.
Well, on that basis, they're currently banned then, and I mean that's just nonsense. They're never prosecuted on this. This is very much targeted towards people who sexually abuse children online and then distribute those publications around the world, so that those children are continually abused, and every time someone goes onto the internet, they can access them.
OK, you very much position yourself as a Justice Minister who's tough on crime. Yet your bail amendment bill still allows for those who have committed a violent crime, alleged to have, to be out on bail.
Yes.
That's not tough on crime.
Well, what it is it's fair. The fact is, until someone has been convicted,
sure, but then what do you say to someone like Christy Marceau's parents, whose daughter died in that circumstance?
Well, there's a great deal of sympathy, obviously, for Chrissy's parents, but the fact is that that particular offender did not have criminal convictions of that sort of nature before, and he was a young man. So what we're doing in the bill is actually extending out or getting rid of the ability for a 17 or 18-year-old to have the presumption of not being placed on remand in prison while they're awaiting their
nonetheless,
their trial.
Someone who is alleged to have committed a violent crime, why should they be allowed out on bail? That doesn't say tough on crime to me.
Well, what it means is that they haven't been convicted, and we don't have a process in this country that we just stick people in jail.
Sentencing Trust would also say that, this is not tough on crime.
Well, the Sensible Sentencing Trust has their particular views, and I think that they do a very good job of standing up for victims. But as Minister of Justice, I actually have to look at both sides. I have to balance the rights and responsibilities, and I have to adhere to the law. And we do not in this country presume that just because someone is charged that they will be found guilty. But we do, however, under our Bail Act and the amendments coming through, we do enable judges to say, you have past convictions for this is a serious matter, you do need to be held on remand.
OK, you also want to make justice more open. How do you propose to do that?
Well, I think that we do a great job in justice in New Zealand. We have an outstanding background, but we don't actually talk about it enough. We don't make it more accessible. And one of the things that I'm really keen on doing is extending out the work that's already happened by the judiciary of publishing decisions online. So I'd like to see these sorts of decisions, even in the district court, where the vast majority of our criminal cases are heard, those published online. Obviously not the family court or youth court, or where there's court name suppression.
So this occurs at the High Court already, you're looking at extending
Well, yes, extending it out, but of course we've got to put the resources in, and our electronic operating model, which we will be rolling out, starts, in fact the first phase of it starts next month, right. And that will actually enable us to have the technology to do that. OK, I spoke to you around this time last year after the Scott Guy murder trial. You said you were looking at the issue of cameras in court. Is that still an issue now? Is it still the issue now that it was last year? Well, I think it still is. It's being looked at by the judiciary with the assistance of the Ministry of Justice, so we've given the judiciary the resources to consider it. We're one of the few countries in the world to have such open access as we have in the trials for cameras. So they're looking at that, looking at their protocols and what is going to best serve justice. So I want an open justice system. I also want a justice system that doesn't actually persecute victims particularly.
OK, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your positioning and within the National Party. We spoke to John Key last week, the Prime Minister, and I'd like to play you a little clip here of what he had to say.
We have a caucus of 59 people, and across that caucus there's a wide range of views. Some are very right-wing and some are actually quite left-wing, and many people are in the middle.
So, whereabouts are you?
Well, actually, I can tell you, I heard Colin James say that there are about 4 factions in the National Party, and I thought from his descriptions I was in every single one of them. So sometimes I think I surprise people. Well,
are you positioned in National, to the left, to the centre, to the right?
I think I'm pretty much just principled and pragmatic in my views, so I say what I think. And whether that's a bit left on some, a bit right on others, a bit middle on something, that's fine too.
It's interesting because some commentators would say you're, the darling of the party's right.
Oh, isn't that lovely? I'd also like to be the darling of the party's centre too.
But what's the feasibility here? Can you nail your colours to the mast? John Key says he's in the centre.
Oh, I think I don't worry too much about that. I look at the principles and I look at what's practical. So I don't see myself as being any particular one faction. I think I'm across the whole lot of them.
OK, what is it then you admire about Margaret Thatcher?
Oh, I think the woman had courage, and integrity. And my view is you can't have a leader who doesn't have integrity and courage, and she did. And the other thing is she had a bunch of utterly sexist males that she had to deal with, and she stood up to them and she led them, and she did a lot better than anyone else, frankly.
Do you have the same, Minister?
What's that?
A bunch of sexist males that you're having to deal with.
Oh, there are obviously times when I have to talk to them.
Why did you not go to Margaret Thatcher's funeral then?
Oh, because Jerry Brownlee was chosen. Well, he's number
Why
3,
was
I'm
he
number
chosen?
5. Well, he's number 3, that's how it works.
Did you put your hand up though?
I certainly did.
Would you have liked to have gone?
Oh, I would have loved to.
And what was the reason given that you weren't allowed to go?
Oh, he was number 3 and I'm number 5. However, having said that, I had a fantastic wake in my office and pretty much the whole party turned up. It was great. And look, I can't be everywhere. I have to also say I had a lot of legislation on that week, so it was probably a little bit, a bit of pie in the sky.
Do you model yourself a little bit on Thatcher?
Actually, I think I modelled myself mostly on my mother.
She have Thatcher qualities?
She could give Margaret Thatcher a run for her money.
OK, well, let's go a little bit back to positioning, because you are constantly identified with the right, certainly among political commentators. You say that the political right-wing blogger, Whale Oil, is better informed than anyone.
I say he's better informed than many people, actually.
OK.
Particularly the mainstream media.
Right.
Obviously not you, Rachel.
Let me read what Whale Oil then has said about some of your colleagues.
Oh, but that's unfair too, because the other thing is I don't agree on everything he says. And,
but you say he's better informed. You know, he said Nathan Guy was a lie. He said Nikki Kay alleged that she'd been on a 3-day bender. David Carter, he said he's a useless, scumless MP.
Oh, and you're an awful lot more than what I did on various things. He often does.
Does that constitute better informed, though?
No, I think it means is that he's got some great sources, particularly in the Labour Party. And
they're constantly talking National, because he has your back.
Well, that's very good. I think he admires someone who stands up for themselves. And frankly, I am one of those people who stands up for myself.
Last year when I interviewed you and I asked you about your aspirations, and you said to me, Rachel, I don't come to Parliament to eat my lunch, you said.
That's so right.
Do we believe then the speculation that you are the National Party's next leader?
Well, that would depend on what other people think. It's extremely hypothetical, and I think that lots of people come to Parliament thinking they're going to do all sorts of things, but you can't do anything without the support of your colleagues, and it's so totally hypothetical, I wouldn't know.
Have you got the support of your party?
Well, I know this, I've got the support of my leader. The Prime Minister supports me, and I support him.